Hello,
We're on.
body of Christ. Yes, we're on. And I have Adam from South Africa. How's everything going, Adam?
It's going well. Thanks, Catherine. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, and this is the first time that we've actually caught up, so it's awesome. And your channel name is Dreamstorm. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
So
If you're
anybody
Swedish,
that
you can say Drömstorm, but
yeah.
I'm not Swedish, and I came up with it because it sounds cool to say Dreamstorm, but spell it
Uh-huh.
strangely, just
Yeah,
to
yeah.
just to be complicated.
And when did you first start your YouTube channel?
Um, I started it on the first day of November, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was on the same day that Martin Zender made a video recommending that people in his audience make their own channels. He was reminding people to do that. He's done that before, but
Yeah.
um, it was interesting that I actually started the channel that day just because I felt like it. And then
Mm.
I was about to hit upload, literally about to hit upload on my first video, and I just felt uncertain about whether I should follow through. And it was very, um, how can I say it? It was like, it was nerve wracking exposing myself so
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah.
And um, I I was literally I went to Martin's channel for the express purpose of
Yeah.
finding some reassurance regarding me uploading a video, and I got it.
Mhm.
And he
Mhm.
was like just telling people to upload videos to their own channels and do that. So it was the perfect confirmation. And
Yeah.
I left a comment on his video saying as much. And from there on, yeah, people just found it, and um, some new people that were not aware of the truth found it too, and that's
Mhm.
been a great motivator.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, I've got some plans that I want to fulfill. It's just going to take a while because some of those plans involve reading through the whole Bible page by page. But
Mm.
I'm excited to find as much time as possible to keep doing that. So
Mhm.
that's how it started.
So you still like I saw you started with Genesis, and what are you up to now?
Man, I'm still in Genesis because I was I was sure that I would do one page or one chapter per day every day, and then I had to get a job,
Mhm.
and that was still able to be juggled with my YouTube channel for a while, but then I just sort of unraveled a bit under the weight of the circumstances, and eventually that job became too much and I had to resign. And
Mm.
then I had the stress of being jobless for the past 20 days.
Yeah.
So I've been learning to rely on the Lord and to understand that I'm genuinely in good hands and that we all are, and that even the troubles we experience are for us. Um, because you can know that, but not live it. So
Mm.
it's an important thing to live and to keep acknowledging and to remind oneself of through the scripture and through fellowship. But
Yeah.
now I'm just trying to see what I have to do next by just taking it day by day and seeing how much time I can make for the channel. If it were up to me, I would just spend every day making
Yeah.
videos and learning about the
Yeah.
gospel and all of that even more. Study.
Mm. Yep. Paul's Evangel, yes, or Gospel, whichever you like to say. I prefer
That's
to
right.
say Evangel, but that's because of the concordant literal New Testament. Let's twist things around a bit today and talk about your how you came to the truth, what your journey was to becoming a believer, and yeah, let's start off with that and let others know how you came to the truth. So, how
Sure.
did you come to the truth? How did you? When did it all sort of start for you?
Well, I brushed shoulders with an aspect of the truth when some preacher on YouTube was talking about hell not being real and that there's enough hell on this earth. Why would there be more waiting somewhere else? but he wasn't substantiating his claims with scripture, so I couldn't take him seriously. And I carried on being Christian, which I was at the time. And eventually I couldn't really cope with Christianity because it seemed too flawed and harmful. It seemed like it was opposite to the way it's presented. And I actually got to a point where I was like, God, I'm not gonna talk to you anymore. You gotta convince me that you're real and everything. I can get into detail on that in a moment or two. But what happened next was I just didn't focus on God or religion or anything of the sort. And a few months of that passed, and I don't even remember how, but I just stumbled onto a Martin Zender video. I don't know what I was searching on Google. I don't know what I was searching on YouTube, but I found his video called Eternal Torment Believers Are Nuts.
Oh, yes.
And that spoke to me, right? I mean, that spoke to me big time. And from there, I just couldn't get enough of his videos because I noticed very quickly that he uses the Bible to talk about these issues. And it wasn't just an atheistic rebuttal against Christianity. It was a claim for God, but against Christianity. And that caught my attention. And before I knew it, I just found myself believing the key truths of Paul's evangel, being that, Christ died for sin and was entombed and was roused the third day by God. And that accomplished the salvation of all, that accomplished the defeat of death, that accomplished everything humanity could hope for, making it a true event of salvation rather than the limited and non-salvation, really, that Christianity puts it out as, misrepresents it as. So yeah, I just found his stuff, and I didn't really look at anybody else's stuff for a long time because I needed one reliable source for a while. But after a while, I started watching other people's stuff. I started watching Johnny Green's videos, and there's a lot of channels I want to check out. But I also watched quite a few clips from Jessica. And it's just been a fun roller coaster ride from there. It's because everyone's got something special to offer. Everyone approaches this in such a different way. Then I found Rob Weil, and I wanted to dig into this more and more. But at first, I was just embracing the grace aspect. I just wanted to rest in not thinking about sin, knowing that I shouldn't feel any need to. So it's only recently that I've started studying.
So was it Christianity that you were mostly part of your life? Were there other religions that you got into, or was it just Christianity?
I was not interested in any other religion. I fell out of love with Christianity pretty solidly, which left me religionless. I was certain I wouldn't even consider anything spiritual again. But before that, I was rather Christian, and I was confident in that for certain periods of time. It may seem like it's something that person chooses because of themselves, but it's because I was exposed to it most, right? And my parents were Christian, and they took me to church, but they had a weird history of experiencing like astral travel and they looked into other religions to a degree, or rather spiritual views, but they came to Christ, or they came to what they found to be Christ for them, which is, a a
Is not.
downgrade from the real Christ, you know.
Mm.
And it was just weird because I needed some sort of stability, and Christianity was more stable than my household, and that meant latching onto Christianity as the anchor in my life. So it was the most stable thing in my life, or so it seemed. And then it started falling apart for its own reasons, and then I just felt lost, and
Yeah.
I just turned to myself at that point because everything disappointed me. But thankfully, that didn't carry on for too long before I found the truth.
Yeah. So when did the Christian life actually start for you? When was it, when you were really young, or what sort of time period do you remember when it all started?
I was probably a believer in the Christian religion, or I was a follower of the Christian religion probably from the age of 6.
Okay.
I I even wrote some lyrics about
Yeah.
about Jesus being the light. Or I was kind of, I didn't specify that, but what did I say? It was kind of about how I was singing, or I wrote the words in a way that was referring to a person is lost who's lost in the woods.
Yeah.
And I was saying to this person, hey, where do you come from? What's your name? Where are your parents? You need to come back to the light. And I was actually not aware that this was what I was doing at the time, but what I was doing was I was speaking to myself, a version of a part of myself. I was trying to extend a helping hand to someone who felt lost, not realizing that that's actually how I felt
Yeah.
in my own life. I felt like I didn't have any real support. I felt like I was lost in the woods in a way, and I thought that Jesus was the answer to everything, and it was a principle that is correct, but it's obviously misapplied by people who misrepresent Jesus. So I stuck with that, and we got involved in a charismatic church. My parents joined the worship team.
So you
I
would have
joined the worship team.
experienced, you would have had some weird experiences there, I'd imagine.
Yeah, certainly. I remember thinking these adults are behaving like kids, and I'm a kid, so what does that make me? I remember thinking, okay, well, they seem to be nice people, so they must be serving some sort of nice creator, and then it was just crazy the way that things was.
Yeah.
It was always this case of justifying things that don't make sense, just to stick within that environment and try to make sense of it where there wasn't any. But really, it was the real goal of that sort of environment is making money and making people comfortable. And then sometimes they have to be reminded of uncomfortable things to feel like they are good people. I'm being very abstract about it, but I think you understand what I'm saying. I keep wondering when I'm going to express these things linearly, but yeah.
Yep. So you had some weird experiences in the churches. So what sort of other experiences did you have? Like, were you involved in activities in the churches, or heavily involved in activities or anything like that? Did you take what they call the Lord's Supper or whatever, and get baptized? Yeah.
Yeah, good questions. I've kind of not thought about that stuff in ages. Yeah, I got baptized in the Holy Spirit or whatever by being submerged in water in a little pool outside the main building. And I was expecting it to be a spiritual experience. And it was rather mundane. But afterwards, someone came up to me and told me, he can tell that I'm a very black and white minded person, and I don't think of things in terms of gray. And he says, or he said, that God likes that about me. And I was like, okay. And I ran with that for a long time because I thought, I had to take something on board. And I don't think that was the best thing for me, because that is a characteristic that I've possessed, but I've actually been moving away from that because it can become moralistic to think only in terms of right and wrong and no in between. And before you know it, it becomes a narcissistic form of judging others. So I'm glad that I'm out of that. But yeah, there was a baptism. There were camps. I went to a lot of camps, and I was always chasing some sort of spiritual experience because my parents had spiritual experiences left, right, and center. Although most of them were dodgy, evil in nature. So I was always thinking, okay, well, I need something to hold on to here to make this real for me. I need to understand that if I give my heart to the Lord, He's accepting that in a way that I can tangibly notice.
He accepts it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So I prayed the sinner's prayer many times because I was never sure about my salvation, because I thought it was based on the prayer and the choice.
Yes.
And
I went through all that.
And that drove me crazy, man. Yeah, and I actually threw some tantrums at the church because I got tired of. I wasn't aware of why I was so upset because I was just a young boy, but I've thought about it a lot in retrospect, and I was essentially irritated with most of the people in that environment because they were pretending to be good by only presenting their supposedly good side to the external world. But meanwhile, they don't realize how they're often just regular people who do regular nasty things, be that intentionally or unintentionally. And I just saw through that, and it angered me because I would think, well, wow, this person seems like they don't feel bad or anything. They're the son of the pastor. Yeah, they've probably got their religious situation together. They feel fine about themselves, man. They must be holier than me. I need to learn from them. And then they would disappoint me, and I'd be like, oh, for crying out loud. And it was just frustrating because at home there was some drama in my house, and my dad was an angry guy, especially when he was drinking, and that's not how he wants to be, but that's often how he was, unfortunately. And that left me looking for peace, for real peace somewhere, and something that was the same. And there was this claim that God stays the same and everything. But then I thought, but then if you're love and if you stay loving, then what are you when people are supposedly suffering in a place of hellfire where they don't die, right? So like, what's going on here? So I would just end up just wanting to escape that, and also focusing really heavily on trying to get other people saved who seemed like they weren't saved, or whatever. And yeah, it was stressful, and I kept trying to present stupid things as if they're more intelligent than they are to people who are intelligent, and they kept making me think even more. And then eventually I just became disillusioned with religion. And I think organized religion is so unnecessary overall. There are few forms of religion that are helpful to people. Prayer is a good thing in general, but it helps to pray to the right God, because when you know the right God, you don't have any interest in organized activities that are supposedly necessary.
Yeah, so what kind of churches did you actually go to? What kind of churches do they have over there in South Africa? I don't even know. Like, I know in America it's a big Baptist, lots of Baptist churches and that kind of thing. What is it like there for you? What churches did you attend?
I tried a few. I even went to a Catholic church once, and that was the most strange because they've got their weird things that they swing around with steam coming from them or something, or smoke. That was weird.
Yeah,
we ate some weird pass over things there. We had a version of that in the regular charismatic church that I was in, where it's mostly about praise and worship, and then 5 seconds sermon, and the sermon's usually just based on some story from the guy's weekend out with his family, and then somehow that's a spiritual boost, and then maybe there's a threat thrown in there about how you have to believe, and then people would come to the front after the service and get prayed for. And often I went to the front and I asked for prayer because I always felt like there was just this one aspect missing that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But other than that, I went to other similar churches just to try them out, and they were all more or less the same. And some were smaller and some were bigger, but they were just charismatic, happy clappy. We don't wear too formal clothes, but we are serious about our version of religion churches.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of family part of the Christian sort of religion? Yeah.
Definitely. I've got family who are in charge of a mega church, and I haven't even told them about my beliefs now yet, because they would probably not take kindly to it. That their mega
Usually
church
the way
is not necessary, and and it's actually, the opposite of good. It's harmful and everything. But yeah, the rest of my family are mostly Christian. My brother is, I would say, agnostic. I have a half brother who's got a different mother than me, so he's got his own other background that's somewhat unlike mine, and his mother was into other things as well spiritually. So he wasn't really big on Christianity, but he is exploring things for himself at his own pace. But he's not going to be duped into believing something silly. He's a smart guy. And the rest is up to God. If he finds the truth, that's up to God. But what was the question again? Oh, the family stuff. Yeah. I've got other family in. My mom moved back to my hometown now, and she returned to the same church community where they raised me, and everyone's accepting her so warmly from scratch, and she fits in there, but I don't. I've obviously reached a point where I can't be around any of those institutions because it doesn't feed me anything. It feels like friction. It obviously just takes away. So I can go there if I have to, but I don't have any interest in going to those sort of places anymore. But yeah, my mom's back there, and she's actually doing some beautiful things in terms of making music that is based on the story of the crucifixion. I'm actually involved in that. I'm performing alongside my mom, but I'm a bit confused about my how can I say it? It feels a bit odd being part of it because I feel that it misrepresents the truth, and at the same time I'm getting paid. So because I'm not making a whole lot right now, I can't really say no to that. But it's something that I'm gonna stop doing at a certain point because it's not really what I stand for, and I've actually begun to zoom in on focusing purely on what I stand for in as many aspects of my life as possible, and really being myself, because my family and their Christian ways, it did put pressure on me to fit in. That was probably the only form of peer pressure that I ever really experienced as heavy. If people told me do drugs, I was like, no. If people said be Christian, I was like, okay. So yeah.
So when was the time that you stopped attending churches and not wanting to be a part of Christianity?
It's been quite a few years by now, maybe 5 or more. I think it's been longer than 5 years, but I'm not so sure. Maybe 2016 is quite a few years ago by now. Yeah, I think it was 2016. So that means it's been 6 to 7 years. I kind of went to churches once or twice initially after discovering Martin's videos, just to see if there's anything that I could still do there that might be beneficial in terms of connecting with one or two individuals. But it was fruitless. So I decided that I'm better off meeting more atheists or agnostics, because they tend to be more relaxed and more accepting of my beliefs, unlike Christians. So yeah, I just realized that that's a hub of cult-like behavior, and I just saw through it, and I just became disinterested, unsurprisingly. So that's why it's been so long, and I'm better off for it. I'm better off for not being at places like that anymore.
Yeah, so did you have any questions growing up in the churches, like, oh, that's not quite right, or did you go, oh, hell can't be right, or things like that? Did anything come to you? Anything that comes to your mind that right now that you
The main thing was hell. That's why I'm so driven to hammer that in to as many minds as I can going forward. But back then I wasn't sure that it could be disproven. I was convinced that it's real, and I was flabbergasted. I was like, I was just terrified, and I grew angry at God, because part of the experience of being Christian was the fear that questioning any aspect of it would result in going to hell. So if you questioned hell, that was obviously a no-no. Or that's how they make you feel, right? That's how the people there make you feel. So I would ask these questions, but not have answers. And I would say to myself, I'll get to that, but for now, Jesus must be the answer. So I'll keep believing, and that's just how I approached it. But that became too much to bear, and after a while, too many things fell apart in my life. I was kind of saying to myself and to God, if you just keep my life afloat and going in a relatively stable direction, then I'll just leave that question be. And then, lo and behold, my life fell apart a bit more. My parents got divorced. The girl I was dating, we broke up, but she kind of broke up with me in spirit ages before that, because I was a very naive and confused boy, and she was a very naive and confused girl. So we weren't really on the same page. But that was a big heartbreak for me. And I moved schools, and that was the point where I was like, okay, all right, hey, Mr. God, I'm angry at you. I don't respect you. I think you're a bad God, and I don't really want anything to do with you, and you better not be real, because this isn't fair. It's bad enough down here, so there shouldn't be something worse waiting for people anywhere else, no matter who they are. Because if you're in charge of them, you're not supposed to leave anyone out of a solution.
Yeah.
right? So if God is so powerful, then he's got to be able to fix this. And if he can't, then he's not all powerful, then something's wrong here. But I slowly, that was the point when I decided, nah, screw this. I'm done with all of this. It's not the most eloquent way of putting all of these things, but yeah.
Yep. So with the death, entombment, and resurrection, how long did it sort of like take for you to realize the real sort of side of things with the death, entombment, and resurrection? Was it a quick sort of, cause it would have been different to how you thought in Christianity? So, was it a process to sort of come to a realization of that, or yeah?
I used to wonder how the immortality of the soul even supposedly works. But then when I watched Martin's videos, and he plainly stated that death means death, and here's why. It wasn't a question in my mind anymore. I just experienced relief and amusement at how brainwashed I'd been. So yeah, it was a relief to be relieved.
With the free will and the Trinity, we know there's no free will, no Trinity, no hell. So when did you realize that? Was it through Martin's videos that you realized that they weren't part of it? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I watched Martin's great debunking videos when it comes to hell, and his great explanations of how the Bible contains two evangels, and that Paul's evangel is the one that's to the nations, i.e. to us today. And that just made me addicted to his videos for a long time before I ever branched out and watched other people's videos. So I would go to the Bible and double check the things he was saying.
Yeah.
But reading outside of the parameters of the verses that he was referring to was too much for me to handle at that time. I had a big hang up about reading the Bible at all for years, and now, that's something I can explain separately. But after that, I just sort of watched as much of his videos as I could, and none of it fazed me. The Trinity video was not something that fazed me. It just made sense, because there were so many questions that I had that I could suddenly think about again. I used to wonder, but how can three be one? I used to wonder, how can
me too.
Right. I used to I used to wonder, how can death be life? These basic things.
I went through the same thing. I was like, I was really open-minded with the whole. I was like, do you go to heaven or what goes on there? Like, of course you don't. But yeah, I went through the same sort of questions as you.
Yeah. So when Martin was like, "There's no Trinity. Death means death. Eternal isn't in the word. It actually has more to do with periods of time and so forth." It all just made sense. So I had permission to think again. It was like permission to allow things to make sense again for the first time in a long time. And I asked all those questions again from scratch, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, but he's answering them. So that's why it was an easy path to go down from that end, or from that point. The one thing that was a bit tricky at first was free will. Not because it didn't seem true, but because it threatened my ego. And I got over that pretty quickly when I realized that just lying in bed and waiting for God to make me move is very quickly achieved by me becoming hungry or needing to go to the bathroom. So, that was like, oh, okay. I was stressed about that. I was like, what? So that's weird. If God's in charge, then why do I feel in charge? And it's like, you can feel in charge and not be ultimately in charge, and that's okay. And actually, that's a good deal, because it means we can feel motivated to do things and not know the future and then be happy about what we find in the future, especially considering that all things return to God.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so after a while, that was very humbling as well. The truth is actually pretty humbling, and it's those that are especially arrogant in general that aren't really interested in the truth, because the truth is humbling, and that's exactly why they're described as being stubborn by God's choice. So eventually
Yeah.
nobody will be stubborn anymore, and it's just a blessing
I
to
know.
be among those who's no longer
Beautiful.
stubborn already.
Yeah. So Scott Hicko actually asked me this question, and I was just wondering what you think is the greatest thing about God that you know. Like, is it like that he saved everybody, all mankind, or is it like that he's in control of everything? What is it for you? Like, do you think it's a number of things or just one thing or what?
That's a cool question. For me,
I had to ask it.
yeah. For me, man, I would say the fact that God's going to make up for everything blows my mind, because you get some pretty rough things that happen to people, and you get some pretty rough things that happen that we don't even know about in the celestials, probably. And there's a lot of animal suffering too. So the fact that God is going to turn all of that around in a way that leaves every part of creation feeling like it was okay, that's impressive to me. And
bringing all creation back to him. Yeah.
The layers to that, they're obviously going to be astounding for us all to observe. So I'm counting that as the best thing I can think of about God for now, in anticipation of those wonderful things.
Well, I think that's a wrap up for now. Thank you for coming on and talking about your religious past and how you came into the truth. It was really good to talk with you. And maybe we can get together with a few other people or do something sometime and do some kind of another video. That would be cool. You never know what God has in store for us. So, yeah.